Hi guys, it's Paul from Bushcraft again. I often get asked the question, what tools do I need to start doing leatherwork? And where do I get them from? What's the minimum I can get away with? What sort of quality do I need? What kind of price do I need to look for? You know, what money do I have to spend? So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to do a little video and just show you the basic tools that you'd need to get started in Leathercraft. All we're going to cover is basically the tools you need for making like a basic sheath or a basic belt. So broadly, our tools fall into three different categories. The first category is the tools we need for cutting the leather, for cutting it out, for cutting lines, for cutting around corners, for putting holes in, and for making the basic shape. The second category are the tools that we need for preparing the edges and finishing the edges off and marking out our stitch lines and things like that. And the third category of tools we're going to look at are the tools we actually need for putting the holes in and the tools for sewing the leather up. So stay with me guys and we'll get on to it. Right, so first off the bat we've got the tools that we need for cutting out, and the first tool you're going to need to purchase is a knife, a Stanley knife. There's various different types of knives on the market. There are knives that are aimed at leather workers. There's things like half moon knives for, you know, that you sharpen up yourself and you can use for cutting a long line at an angle. I find a lot of those they're specialist tools. They're tools that was used a long time ago, and I think we've got better alternatives now in the modern world. So what I use is just a basic Stanley knife. This is a Stanley knife I used to use at work to sharpen my pencils when I was a cabinet maker. It's a folding Stanley knife, which is good because it keeps the blade tucked away when it's not in use. Make sure you don't cut yourself. And yeah, you don't have to sharpen it. The blades are extremely cheap. And I go through quite a lot of blades because they do dull fairly easily. But yeah, you don't need anything more complicated than just a Stanley knife for cutting out leatherwork. I do all of my cutting out with this, and it works perfectly well. Right. So the second tool we're going to need is a steel ruler. Now, I've got a few different sizes of these, just mainly for sort of getting into smaller areas. But what I would advocate is if you can get yourself a 2-foot long steel ruler as a minimum. They're not that expensive. This one's that old that you can't even see the inch markings on it anymore, but I only really use it as a straight line anyway. Any measuring I need to do, I do with a smaller ruler, and that's this one, which is just a 300mm aluminium or steel ruler, basic ruler. These are fairly cheap, but like I say, I have a few different sizes. I have a small one that's only 6 inches long that I use for getting into smaller areas, and yeah, just basic cheap steel ruler, aluminium ruler, preferably a long one for cutting sort of long strips, and then a shorter one for doing smaller areas. It's sort of handy if it has, you know, graduations on for measuring stuff out as well. So I do most of my measuring with this one. So yeah. For cutting soft leather rather than firm leather, you're going to need to purchase a rotary cutter, because it's very difficult to keep a straight line with a knife on soft leather. It tends to bunch and it wrinkles, and as you cut you'll find you get a wavy edge. But because the blade moves as you're actually cutting, you get a much sort of flatter area and you'll get a straighter line with that if you're doing soft leather. But if you're just going to cut firm leather for sheaves and stuff like that, then I wouldn't worry about a rotary cutter. You're much better off with a Stanley knife. And then the last tool we need for cutting is basically a rotary hole punch. You can buy these fairly cheaply, but in my experience they tend to be very crap. Basically, it's difficult to find a good quality one. I tend to look for vintage ones at antiques fairs and car boot sales and things like that, because you tend to find that even though they're really old, the build quality is much better. But this has got a number of different holes on, from sort of 1.5 or 2mm right the way up to something like 6 or 7mm, which is perfect. That should provide you all the holes you need for putting things like press studs in and rivets in, and you know, just have a practice with it and find out what the best cutter is for the size of what you need to put in. So if you do a really big hole, your press studs might wobble about, so just have a bit of a practice on some scrap first to make sure that you've got the right size hole. So yeah, so that's the cutting tools dealt with. Right, now the next batch of tools we're going to look at are the tools that we need for edge preparation or edge marking. And when you've cut out your basic shape, you'll need to put either some kind of a line in or a groove in to mark where your stitches are going to go along the edges. And also you're going to need to do what we call bevel any other edges that are on show to smooth them off, make them nice and round and just appear a little bit better. So basically, when it comes to marking out edges for stitches, we have two options. The first option is an adjustable groove. And what you do is you undo this nailed nut and that moves backwards and forwards, gives you a different size line. And we'll just run this around the edge where we need our stitches to go. And it creates a little channel for the stitches to sit into. Now that's not actually 100% necessary. You can get away without that. You could draw a line on with a pen and mark your distance off with a ruler and put your holes in that way. Or another way would be to use this, which is called an adjustable edge crease. Now what this does is this pretty much it runs down the edge the same as the groove cutter does, but it'll just put a tiny thin crease. It'll put a little line in, so it won't actually take any of the top surface of the leather off. It'll just put a little line in down the edge, and it gives you a kind of a guide or an idea of where to put your stitches. I mean, you can also use this on areas that aren't sewn to put a little fine line around the edges just for a bit of a decorative value. And this increases. I mean, this goes from practically nothing right the way up to something like 10mm. So you can get quite a wide variety of different sort of size lines in that. Again, with all these tools, once you pick them up, have a practice with them and play around, see what you like, best about them and how they actually work before you decide to apply them to some leather that you've bought specifically for a job. So there are our two methods of marking a line around the edges of our leather. Now the other tool you will need is called an edge bevel. And this is a number 2 edge bevel. They come in about 3 different sizes. But I've found that I can pretty much get away with a number 2 on anything from a 4 or 5mm leather right down to like a 2mm leather, just by varying the angle of the pitch. These can be a little bit difficult to use because you need to use them at a 45-degree angle to the vertical and also a 45-degree angle to the horizontal, like a compound mitre. So you're going to have to play around with that a little bit to try and get to achieve the look you want. What that does is that takes a 45-degree off the front of the leather and a 45-degree off the back, which gives us like a kind of a half hexagon, which enables us then to use this tool, which is called a burnisher, to rub along the edge of that leather, and it turns that hexagon into a round. Now to achieve this, what we need to do is we need to wet the edge. So a little jar with some water in and a wool dauber. These are the daubers they use for dyeing, that they sell for dyeing, but I found them really good for sort of dipping in water and running water along the edge. And then when you've run the water along the edge, you can move this backwards and forwards quickly up and down, and you'll find it turns that hexagon into a round. Just makes it look a little bit neater. So that's how our edge preparation tools dealt with. Right, so now the third and final category is the tools we require for stitching. Now, as I've said previously, I know quite a few people who use just literally a ruler to mark out the distance of their holes. They'll sort of mark a hole every 10mm or 7mm or 1/4 inch or whatever down the line of their groove or the line of the crease, and then they just punch the holes in and stitch that way. But there are quite a few specialised tools we can use, and we can buy these things which are called pricking irons. Come in quite a few different sizes. I think there's about 6 different sizes these come in. That's a 4mm, that's a 6mm. So for different jobs, for bigger areas or for smaller, more intricate jobs, I think the smallest they go down to is a 3. I think you do 3, 4, 5 and 6, I think they do. But these used to be really expensive. You can still pick them up, Osborne pricking irons and things like that. They're something like £30 each. But there's a few companies on eBay now that are knocking these out for something like £8 or £9 a set. Now they're not the best quality, they're not as brilliant as the Osborne tools, they're not going to last as long or give you such a persistent finish, but I tend to find you drop these and the tines smash off. So if you've paid £30 for one, the tine smashes off, you're going to be a bit fed up. But if you paid £8 for a complete set, then it's not too bad, it's worth getting a few different sizes and just trying to give it a go and see what suits you the best. They generally come in a 1 prong, a 2 prong, a 4 and a 6 prong. in a set. So they're good. They're quite good value. So look out for them on eBay. That's the best place to find those. So what we do basically with these is we'll start off, hit them in all the way through the leather, pull it out, and then the first tooth in the last hole that you've already cut to keep the spacing regular, and just go along like that. I'll probably do another video on how to use these a bit more effectively later on, but this is just an introduction for now. So that's how we put our holes in. Then we also have an awl. This is a diamond bladed awl. I think already you can see the blade on that. It's a diamond blade, diamond shaped blade. It's very, very sharp. And this is an awl we use for stitching. Generally what we'll do is we'll go through one side of the leather with the pricking irons, glue the leather together, and then we'll use the awl to go through the hole that we made in one side and push it out through to the other side. You can, if your measurements are really good, you can literally put all your holes in to start with, and then when you fold them together you should be able to just go straight through. But it takes a lot of practice to make sure you get everything really accurate and really in place. So I'll probably do another video on stitching. There's plenty of videos out there on stitching anyway, but I'll probably do another video on stitching later on. Like I say, this is just an introduction. So the next things we're going to need are needles. And these are quite big ones. These are the needles that I use with the tiger thread, which is the thicker thread. You can get about 6 or 7 different sizes of these needles too. I think these are size 00, 000. These ones are quite large needles. But they're available on eBay as well. Just look up saddler's needles or leather needles. What you don't want is you don't want the ones that have got a point on, like the blade on this, the ones that are pointed, because they're designed to go straight through thin leather, and they're not going to work very well for what you're doing. You'll tend to find they'll get snagged in the thread and everything. So you just want blunt-ended saddler's needles, saddle's harness needles, and you see they've got quite a blunt end on it, that one. Generally what I tend to do is, with the thinner thread, with the linen thread that I use, that I'm going to show you in a minute, I use a number 2 needle. And with the tiger thread, which is the thicker thread, it's either 1.2 or 1.4 thick braided nylon thread. I tend to use the thicker needles, the 000, 000 needles, whatever they are. So thread. So this is your basic, just a basic linen thread. This is an 18/3 linen thread. It's quite thin. It's probably sort of 0.5 millimetre thin, made from linen. There's various different qualities out there. Some of it's good, some of it's not so good. So you might have to try a few different brands before you find the one that you like really the best. And then this one, which is another thread I really like, but takes a bit more practice to use, is called tiger thread or Ritzer thread. It's a braided nylon. So it's actually kind of, I don't know how well you can see that, but it's actually oblong in cross section. It's flat. You know, it's wider than it is sort of deep. This comes in about 6 different widths, and people tend to use the 0.8 for sewing ordinary leather, but I buy the 1.2 or 1.4 because I use this when I sew soft leather for like my Viking pouches and stuff. So that's really good. It's expensive thread, but it's really good thread. I wouldn't recommend it for the beginner though, because it does take a bit of practice to make sure it stays flat when it goes through the holes and stuff. If we're using the linen thread, we're going to need a block of beeswax. And basically what this is for is it kind of helps the thread go through the hole quicker, and it keeps it a little bit more moisture proof, stops it rotting so much. And all we do with that is we just lay it over the edge of the wax and pull it through, and it literally transfers some of the wax to the thread. And if we're using the braided nylon, this is already waxed, it's pre-waxed thread, so you don't have to mess about that with this one. So the final piece of kit that I've got to show you is just a basic pair of long nose pliers. And the reason for these is just for pulling your needles through. If they should get stuck, you generally should be able to do it with your finger strength, but sometimes they get wedged and it's just a bit difficult, so you need to just give them a rive and pull them through. But these also come in handy for getting into small spaces to put rivets and press studs in if you can't reach, and Chicago screws and things like that. So they're a bit of a multi-purpose tool really. So there we go. So I hope that's helped, guys. Like I said, it is a very basic introduction, and I'll probably go into do some more videos on how you use these tools and what the best applications of these tools are. But that's the basic set of tools that I use every day for my leatherwork, and it's what I would recommend to everybody else to start with. You don't have to pay a lot of money for these tools. They are available on eBay. You can get them cheap. You don't have to buy them new. You can buy them second hand. I mean, car boot sills for your pliers, for your rotary punches, car boot sill for a Stanley knife. The only thing you will probably have to buy new is going to have to be your pricking irons, and possibly bevelers and creasers and adjustable gouges, because they don't tend to come up for sale very often. I do see a lot of vintage saddle makers' tools at car boot sales and things like that, collectibles fairs, but generally they tend to be very specific, and they're not particularly the sort of general purpose tools that we need. So there you go, guys. If you've got any further questions or you want any more explanation of what I've shown you, feel free to message me in the comments or find me on Facebook or Instagram or anywhere. I'm quite available. I'll leave my email at the end of this video, so if you want to email me, you can email me, and I'll try my best to help. Okay, guys, thank you. Bye bye.